Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the best number AD433-3. This is their key combinator. Key punch is what it is. It is their preeminent tool. There was a predecessor to this, the red punch, which is famous in certain circles. This is the current model of tool that's used to generate original best keys. There are three variants of the AD433. There are three systems in the best system, and that's the difference. There's the A2, the A3, and the A4. The A2 is by far the most common. A4 is after that. I don't encounter any A4, but they certainly, people who make a living as locksmiths certainly do. A3 I've never encountered, and I believe that even people that are full-time professional locksmiths don't encounter it. I think where you end up finding that, I'm led to believe, is in military installations, and those types of places have their own staff, direct staff that maintain and manage those systems. In fact, this A3 machine, this A3 Combinator, is indeed going to a military installation. Yeah, most certainly it is, and that would make sense. I wouldn't ever thought that I'd sell a machine to extend an A3 system. The difference between the three systems, and we're going to get to the Combinator in a moment, is a little bit of locksmithing theory. The A2 system is a two-step system where you have depths 0 through 9. So you have a total of 10 possibilities of numbers in any one chamber. It's a two-step system because when you are generating keys, you're not going to have the difference of one step or one key number between cuts. Just, speaking very generally about the system. You're going to have a two-step system, 10 cuts. The difference or the increment between each of those cuts is 0.0125. So the difference between a 5 cut and a 6 cut on a caliper is 0.0125. So very, very close together. That's why two keys cannot be cut one step away, because the thickness of its master pin would be far too small to work reliably. The quantity of changes that can be generated in an A2 system is defined by how many chambers are in the system. So you could have, in a 6-pin core, you could have, you've got 10 cuts. It's a two-step system, so you're going to go to every other cut. So what you would have in this case, total number of possible change keys. So in a 10-step system, we're going to take, if it's a 10-step system, it's a 10 increment system, two-step system, that means 5 possibilities per chamber. There's 10 cuts, you're going to go every other one, that's 5. You're going to pull one of those out because you're not going to use in your bidding for a change key the same number of bidding value of what's in the master key. So that really leaves 4 possible cuts that you can have in your change keys. If you have a 6-pin system, it would be 4 to the 6th power, that simply, and that's 4,096 changes that you can have, theoretical changes. And actually, there would be nothing. Well, it would be 4,096 theoretical changes. You might discard some of those because you're not going to use those keys, like a 9 cut at the very throat of the key. You'd probably avoid that because it would so weaken the key. I would personally avoid it. But 4,096 theoretical changes. If you had a 7-pin system under an A2, A2 is defined as 10 cuts, two-step system. You have to have 2 steps because the increment is 0.0125. It's too close. You can't have a master key that has a 9 and then have a change key as an 8 or any number that's 1 away. 10-step system. If you have a 7-pin system, now you've got four changes, possible changes per chamber to the 7th power, which would be 16,384 changes. Okay, that's great. If you had the A4 system, you would have a total possible depths of 6 depths, 0 through 5. If you're going to hold off one of those possible depths as your master key, you're going to be left with 5 possibilities. 5 to the 6th power is 15,625. The A4 system is a single step. The increment is 0.021, and that is, in the world of best, reliable enough to have cuts 1 step away from each other. And the point of the A2 to the A4 system, because it goes to single step, you pick up an entire additional quantity in each chamber. An A2 system, if you've got a master key, you've got 4 remaining from your 2-step system. In an A4, you've got 5 left over. A4 is a single step, 6 total cuts. Hold one of those cuts off for the master key. That will leave you with 5. 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. 5 to the 6th power is 15,625. If you had a 7-pin system, that would be 78,125 changes. So you can see the advantage of an A4 system over an A2 system because you just get more possible changes. Well, you're still using all the same cores. You're still using all the same keys. You just have to cut the keys differently and use a different pinning kit because the lengths of a 2 bottom pin is going to be different in an A4 than it is in an A2 because it's a different incremental system. The A3 comes in because it is a single step system that has a total number of 7 possible cuts in each chamber. Its increment is 0.018. So 7 total possible cuts. So what they did was, it's an A4 system, but it's just 1 step closer together. So everything gets smaller. The increment goes to 0.018. In that system, in an A3 system, you have 7 possible cuts. If you hold one out for the top master key, you've got 6 possible cuts for each chamber for change keys. 6 to the 6th power is 46,656. In a 7-pin environment, you have almost 280,000 theoretical changes. The problem with the A3 system is 0.018. A2 was 0.0125, much closer, but that's a 2-step system. So your effective increment becomes 0.025. 0.025. So 0.025 is far enough away to not create fouling up of a key when it's operating the cylinder. 0.021 in an A4 system works. There's not, that I'm aware of, reported failures. But when in the A3 environment, it was discovered that a 0.018 was too small of an increment between a 4-cut and a 5-cut, or a 2-cut and a 1-cut, that there would be jamming. The wafers are so small, the split pin, the master pins, are so small at that point, but that they become unreliable. However, you have all of these installed A3 systems that still require to be serviced. And obviously, having an A3 system and you're finding that the 018 causes problems, maybe not initially with brand new cylinders and brand new pins and brand new keys. When things start to wear, that 018 can get jammed at the shear line, really. It'll fall in between a worn control sleeve and the plug itself and not work reliably. So that's the advantage of the A3, was the significantly greater number of changes. And you can imagine that if you had a military installation, and that military installation, or any facility like the campus of a Big Ten university, where you have not only one building with 1,000 doors, but you've got 10 of those buildings, okay, just for the dorms. Okay, then you have all the other buildings. So you could easily understand how an A3 system would be incredibly attractive. That 018 ended up being a fatal flaw for it. So A3, I understand, is not used to generate a new system. It would be A2 or A4. So really, which system you go with will have to be a recognition of how many possible changes are you going to need. Now, why would you use a really expensive dedicated machine to cut keys? Well, because you need them cut correctly, is why. I own different key machines, you know, and they do the same job, but they do it differently. Obviously, they do. Cutting machines on a traditional key duplicator, manual, semi-automatic, fully automatic, is a different process than using a Combinator from Best. Okay, this is going to look all but identical to to my eyes. This would look identical to its A2 and its A4 companion products. The -3 in the part number tells us that it's an A3 system. Now, the reason why, if you're generating very large systems, if you're generating and maintaining a Best original system, I sold a key carriage to a school district, and they have hundreds of doors that they need to continue to obviously maintain. The science of how a key and a pin and a plug and a housing all work together is all designed and engineered to go together. When you cut keys on a duplicator, you know, that has a milling cutter on it, or, you know, whatever type of cutter is going to be appropriate for the key that you're cutting, that cutter is, let's just say, you know, 2.5-inch diameter. It's a round cutter. You could certainly understand that the cut on the bottom of the key, if I was going to grossly exaggerate the cut on my key, is going to be the profile of the cutter itself. So what you end up having is, you have when you look at the key in profile, you have a straight across cut, but the depth, if you were to measure the absolute outside of the cut of the key, it would be marginally different than the depth if you were to measure the center line of the cut of the key. To exaggerate what it would look like, that's what the purpose of this drawing is. If I was looking at my key in cross section at a cut, that profile would have to mimic the profile of the cutter. Well, with the machine like this, you have a punch, a die and a punch set. Well, that comes, and that is going to cut utterly flat, because it is a tool that is straight, and it's going to cut through the material, so you're going to get an absolute flat bottom to your key. Okay, the pin has to rest inside of that cut. Okay, the pin has to make contact, and it was designed to work this way, with this type of cutter, not with a rotary cutter. I have cut small format keys on typical duplicators, and they work. But you will, after you do it enough, detect how it is simply different. You will be able to detect how the pins ride differently inside of the operating plug, and while the difference is so minor that generally the tolerances inherent in manufacturing permit there to not be an issue with it, the proper way to cut a Best key is to punch the key, and a Combinator like this obviously achieves that. So this is what is called a right-hand key combinator for an A3 system. It's right-hand because that handle is on the right side. Okay, there are left-hand sides, and they are different because they cut different keys. You have your depth adjustment, which is over here, You're going to set your depth using this lever. This is your key carriage, and that's what's going to move as you make the cuts on your key. That is what's going to continue to move in. And when you start a new installation, just to demonstrate that, and I apologize, this tool is 22.95 pounds. If you just watch the key carriage, it moved in. It moved in. And you go through all of your cycles, and then you'll be at your sixth or seventh or 5 or 6 or 7th cut at the bow of the key. In order to understand that why an A3 machine is different than an A2, you just have to go back to understanding, well, they're different increments. So while the spacing center to center from the tip of the key to the first cut, because small format is red tip to bow, the tip of the key to the first cut, it's center, and then the subsequent centers, those are the same regardless of the system because they're using all the same plugs, the same cores. The depth at which A2, let's say, is defined because of that increment difference between the 3 systems, you can understand how far in or deep in the combinator places the die to make the cut is different on all 3. The key carriage should be the same carriage across all 3 systems, and this can be converted to cut A2, which is nice, and in fact it's actually quite easy. We're going to get into the manual that's included with this as well, in the operation as well. So this machine is known to be able to be incredibly robust, incredibly capable of cutting keys, tens of thousands of keys flawlessly. I did sell a client a key carriage from his machine that was probably from about 1999, and it's only because tens of thousands of keys have been cut, and the tooling not only gets worn, but it does get quite dirty. I don't know if it was if there was any lack of maintenance. The machine does like to be kept clean. I find that if you don't keep a punch machine like this clean, it doesn't register its centers exactly correct, and when they don't, you have the tapered side of the pin riding on the side of the cut. So as you insert the key into a core, you'll see the pins are okay in the beginning, but then they're shallow the further you get away from the face of the plug. So maintenance is really important on this and any machine. Okay, its basic operation is indeed very simple, and we're going to get into that here now. Let's get into it now. So we talked about why it's an A3, and obviously when you have an A3 system, you're going to have an A3 pinning kit as well. Okay. Now this tool is going to include this chip bucket. This literally, we're going to move this camera down now so that we can see the tool. This chip bucket is going to hang off the side literally and just catch the chips of the key as you cut them, as you go through. So what I've done is I've pulled my carriage forward, and you'll load the key with the carriage pulled forward. But let's go through the operation of it. There is a link below this video to the operating instructions. They are indeed included. There is a warranty registration card, which must be filled out. Your serial number is here. Okay. All of this needs to be taken care of. You need to be able to go back to the factory ultimately if there's any trouble. A tool like this is an absolute substantial investment that needs to be properly documented. It's also going to come with the Key Combinator service manual, and there is a link below this video to this document, so you can review it, either your hard copy that you would get or beforehand or afterwards, based on the link that we have there. So The operating instructions are indeed an abbreviated version of the service manual as to how they go through the steps of, getting started, so to speak, on your key cutting activities. And the service manual does go through that at length a bit further on how to go about cutting keys. And it is on page 3-4 of the service manual that I'm looking at. Best recommends that you have this secured down to a table. You can bolt it to the table. There are feet, rubber feet that are here that you can run a bolt through should you want to get that secured down to the table. Best recommends that it be absolutely secure. You by no means want to knock it off the table. And actually, I was speaking to a locksmith at a military installation, and he told me that he accidentally knocked one off the table and that it worked just fine. But obviously, that practice is not recommended. So best recommends that you secure the key combinator to a flat surface before you begin cutting keys. You can install bolts either through each of the 4 rubber feet. There are indeed 2 here and 2 at the back, as you can see, or through 2 holes in the base of the combinator. Yeah, well, modifying, you're going to put them through the feet is what you're going to do to bolt that down. By the way, your nameplate, date of birth, so to speak, and serial number are all on the back side. To load a best standard key blank, you basically grip the key clamp knob and you pull it forward. And I've basically just pulled it forward. It's pulled forward. Gripping the key clamp knob, pull the carriage completely forward. Turn the key clamp knob counterclockwise to open the key clamp for a right-hand machine. If it's a left-hand machine, you're going to do quite the opposite, meaning you're just going to rotate it the other way. When you rotate the key clamp counterclockwise, you open up this area here into which you're going to insert your key to cut. I have a key that's here, and I'm not going to cut any keys on this because it's going right to the client. And it's already been cut. You push that all the way in, and it will stop because it's going to hit the stop on the back of the machine. Then, of course, you're going to rotate it counterclockwise is where it's loose. Turning it clockwise is what's going to make that key set in place. Okay. Carriage is all the way out. Counterclockwise, load the key, tighten it. Key is now set. Okay. You know that you're in the setup position at this point. You've got your key loaded. With the curved edge of the key blank against the locating surface, slide the blank into the key opening. Make sure that the knife edge of the key clamp spring fits into the groove of the key, and that certainly is the case. There is this area here right at the tip of my finger, that curved piece of metal, and that little knife edge that they're referring to needs to ride into the groove of the key blank so that it is going to slide in there correctly. Okay. And if you watch that area, you can see it move up and down. That's what's locking the key in place. Okay. The key clamp knob hangs loosely, and that's the way it's normally supposed to operate. To cut a best standard key blank, before you begin to cut keys, make sure the key carriage is still completely forward. Okay, yeah, we're loaded and we're completely forward. Move the depth selector to 0. For the setup stroke. So before you make any cuts, you have to make one cycle of the machine with it in the 0 position. I understand that it doesn't have to be in the 0 position. It can be in the same position as your first cut, I've been told, but the instructions clearly indicate to put it in the 0 position. Pull the operating lever firmly down, as I just did, until it strikes the rubber bumper. It has to make contact with this completely, otherwise your key carriage may not be spacing correctly. Let the operating lever move back up. Failure to strike the rubber bumper may cause the key carriage to move to the next space too soon. The Combinator automatically moves the key carriage and key blank into place for the first cut. Do not touch the key carriage during key cutting. The Combinator precisely advances the key carriage with each stroke of the operating lever. So don't try to bias this at all. It's not designed or engineered to be touched. It's not going to slam very hard into the next position. It will gracefully move. And you don't need to try to soften its movement by putting your hands on it. Move the depth selector dial to the key cut depth number that you need to make on your key. So we know that this is an A3 system. Okay, we already know that an A3 system has a total of 7 possible cuts, 0 through 6. You're going to move this to where you need to have your first cut. I do wish to go back and talk about the settings on the depth selector wheel. When I made my setup cut, I did indeed have it not at the 0 mark. I had it at calibrate. The word calibrate is right here. You're not going to use the calibrate at all unless you are literally trying to calibrate the machine, which is further in the installation instructions and service manual. So a 0 cut is where you cover, or a 2 cut is where you cover the 2. It will go from 0 all the way up to 6. Okay. Now, what is called your setup stroke is just a position that is, off of the key blank, so to speak. So you won't be making any cut there at all. So you've got your first setup, then you'll work your selector knob all the way through its positions. You'll fully stroke the machine, return it back, and continue on. The key carriage will continue to go until it's all the way retracted into the machine, at which point you can then turn that counterclockwise, pull your cut key out, and you're in really good shape. Okay. The next step of the installation, or the service manual, goes into conversion of how to manipulate the machine to get it to do other systems. You can convert your equipment from an A2 to an A3 to an A4 and vice versa. Might be very handy. I'm not familiar with anyone who has, I don't remember selling any depth dial, depth selectors only for someone to convert, but the fact that you can do it is brilliant, and not having to buy an entire new full machine. The conversion in the service manual, which we won't go into, is really simple and straightforward. There's 2 screws to convert this into a different system. Remove the depth selector, replace it. Instructions on how to replace the punch and die are there as well. After that part of the service manual, you get into the steps to replace parts, such as the key carriage, or the punch and die, or the handle itself. And all that's detailed there, so as you move forward in your relationship with your key combinator, you're able to maintain it in the field. I have not read anywhere that the factory offers the service of you sending the machine in for a rebuild, or just a refit and a cleaning, all the way to replacing parts and bringing you back to factory specs. I would not be surprised if they certainly did offer that service. People who manufacture key machines certainly do. There are times when it is best to send the machine in. Certain repairs can be done here, and key machines are really meant or made in such a way where there's such transparency with all the part numbers and the instructions on how to do it, that it can be done. And a locksmith is going to be generally quite mechanically inclined to begin with. There are also times when, you know what, I cut keys. That's what I do. I don't know anything else beyond that. So maybe that would be a scenario by which it would go back to the factory. Replacing parts, as I had mentioned, are there. Scrolling through the rest of the service manual, calibration comes into play. I have owned punch equipment, and calibration, I've not run into that being a problem. Keeping it clean, in my experience, really prevents you from having to recalibrate a machine, but you would recalibrate it when you replace parts, absolutely. So that would be part of the process. And the recalibration procedure is detailed in the service manual. You do get this wrench, which is used in part of the depth calibration procedure that's included. And that works with the depth selector assembly itself. Scrolling through the rest of the service manual, everything on here that can be replaced, they talk about how to go about replacing it. And then they get into troubleshooting, and you can review all of that. The installation instructions, this blue sheet that is included, we did go over the long way of reviewing the same steps to cut a key from the service manual and looking at this. They do show a very good cross-section of how the knife edge, as I was trying to demonstrate, grips the key and how it keeps it in place. And, you know, that's the beauty of this machine. It's not only significantly robust, but it's also tragically simple to use. Once you understand how to load the key and make your setup stroke, cut keys, it's really it's really very simple. And that's why people, I'm sure, buy it. So there are links below this video that we're going to touch on quickly. Yes, I am corrected. There is literally a link below this video to the key combinator form, and that is when you want to request service on your machine to go back to the factory. Key cutter repair and calibration procedure is also listed there as well. Quick reference to combinating best cores is also there. It's informational. The quick reference to combinating best cores literally is found underneath the top lid of your combinating kit. Doesn't come into play when you're cutting keys as much because you know the bitting, but this talks about how to physically combinate the keys that you're dealing with. Then you have a column of links there for us to review, and the next one is going to be called Product Brochure. That's very handy because it is the relatively small section of the full line catalog that goes over all of the service equipment. It is everything best related as it comes to combinating their cores in terms of a tool perspective. So that would be very helpful to review. There is also a link to a document called Cut Sheet. That is just a simple overview of the item, giving you the different part numbers that you would use to specify the different types of machines. And we're going to talk about, we've talked about at length the A2, A3, and A4 systems, and we'll talk about the others in a moment. The service manual is there, and that, again, is incredibly handy because it talks about everything we just went through, but it talks about the different handings of the machines that are necessary. This is a right-hand machine. A right-hand machine is going to cut out of the service manual. All standard keyways require a right-hand configuration for the key combinator. If you're doing run-of-the-mill best, you need a right-hand machine. Some premium keys require a right-hand configuration, and that would be on page 2-5, the WA, WB, WC, WG, WH, WK, WY would be premium keys, and then you would pick that up as a part number in the service manual. Pardon me, you'd pick that up as a part number in the cut sheet as an AD433P. P for premium. Okay. The WD and WE require a left-hand configuration where this handle will be turned around. Actually, and then all patented keyways require a left-hand configuration, and that's all listed there in the manual, the service manual, which you need. There's also on pages 2.2-2 and 2-3 a breakdown of the constituent part numbers for these items, and you'll see exactly what you may need to order when ordering a key carriage. And that part number 2, or actually the right-hand configurator, part number 3, the standard key carriage, indeed, the C70578 is what that school district ordered because they needed to replace their key carriage. They were able to do so successfully. The service manual, we've gone through that. That is a document that will, spend the life of the tool alongside. Best Combinator operating instructions, that's that blue page that comes with it that we have kind of touched on. Best Combinator unpacking instructions, that would be important to, I find, to keep the box, keep the bag, keep all of the packaging. Should it ever need to go anywhere, this is a tested, approved method of packing the machine so that it survives transit and not become damaged. I personally would put all of it back into its original box, and then I would put that all into a larger box, and I would fully insure the tool whenever you're shipping it, and obviously by means of a service that gives you tracking, which I think is every service available nowadays. And that really represents everything. It's a very simple machine that allows you to cut to do one job. It does one job at a time, it does it very well, and then it moves on. It is an absolute robust machine. I don't know if Best actually manufactures this in-house or if they have a specific company that may do nothing but make key cutting equipment, make it for them. It doesn't really matter. It's a robust tool that they are out in service and are for decades. Finally, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Best products that we sell, a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. It was Frank Best who patented the small, what would become the small format interchangeable core concept. A dual share line is certainly not his invention, and I don't know if that dual share line was a Corbin and is a Corbin Russwin product. A small format core is a dual share line product that was patented maybe in the early 1920s by Frank Best. I forget the exact year. That's easy to find. A trip down Google Patent Avenue will allow you to see lots of interesting patent filings for items that we kind of use often. The small format, what became small format, is probably the most imitated product by countless other manufacturers for decades as possible. But what makes Best the sole best greatest source for a small format is their approach to servicing and supporting the installed client base. The locksmiths, the institutions, the people who run their systems, they get direct, complete, and total support from the factory. Every single time that I've contacted Best for what would be, in comparison, very simple questions, I get a full and complete response promptly. And their approach to service is, in my opinion, what keeps the small format system alive and well, where there are other technologies of cylinder type construction that we've never heard of because they never got off the ground, so to speak. Best 100 years later is still the name of the game, a Best type core. Anyway, any questions on the AD433 in a 3 system, an A3 system, or any other Best product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.